Hello everyone, this is third lecture of eye. In this we will discuss about the pupillary diameter and errors of refraction. So specific learning objectives of today's lectures are to know about importance of pupil diameter, to know about depth of focus and to know about errors of refraction and its treatment. So first we will discuss about the pupillary diameter. Now you all know that pupil is an aperture which is formed in between the arrangement of iris. Okay. Now iris is as such made up of two type of muscle fiber, circular muscle fiber and radial muscle fiber. And this pupil it determines that how much amount of light will enter into our eye, and this diameter of the pupil will change according to the requirement of the eye, that if the eye required a more amount of light to enter, then the aperture become big, and if the amount of light should be less, then and in that case the pupillary aperture will be small. Okay. So amount of light that enter the eye through the pupil is proportional to the area of pupil or to the square of diameter of pupil. Okay. So that how much amount of light will enter into our eye, that is determined by the area of the pupil or in short size of the pupil. The pupil of human eye can become as small as 1.5 millimeter and as large as 8 millimeter in diameter. So this pupil can become small as 1.5 mm or as large as 8 millimeter. Now this one is the normal arrangement of iris. Okay, iris is made up of two type of muscle fiber. The one is circular, this inner one, circular muscle fiber. Okay, and outer is radial muscle fiber, and this aperture through which the light rays enter to our eye, it is known as pupil. Okay, so this is the normal pupil. Okay, now when the circular muscle fiber of iris contract, it causing the decrease in the pupil size, and that constriction of pupil is known as the miosis. Okay, and the when the radial muscle fiber, this one outer radial muscle fiber contract, it causes the dilation of pupil or increase in the size of pupil, that is known as mydriasis. Okay. This meiosis is mainly occur when the parasympathetic activity increases, and mydriasis occur when sympathetic activity increases. Okay. So change in pupillary diameter in response to varying intensity of light. When the light intensity is more, at that time it causes the constriction of the pupil. Okay. And when the light intensity is less, at that time it causes the dilation of pupil. So mostly in bright light the pupil is constricted, and in the dim light the pupil is dilated. Okay. So this constriction is known as meiosis. During meiosis, the circular muscles of iris contract, causing pupillary constriction, and this is mainly done by the stimulation of parasympathetic nervous system. And during mydriasis, the radial muscles of iris contract, causing pupillary dilation, and this mydriasis or pupillary dilation is mainly caused by stimulation of sympathetic nervous system. Now three terminology: angle gamma, optical axis and visual axis. So first we see what is optical axis. So as you can see in this figure, here we have a two axis, one is optical axis, another one is visual axis. Now optical axis is the axis which pass through the center of the pupil and center of the lens, or we can say the nodal point. Okay, so the line which pass from center of the pupil and nodal point, that is known as optical axis, and the line which passes through the nodal point and fovea centralis, which pass through this fovea, and the centermost part of fovea is known as fovea centralis. So, line which passes from this fovea centralis and nodal point, that axis is known as visual axis. Now, normally there is one angle is formed between these two axes, and that axis is known as angle gamma or gamma angle, and that is normally of 5 degree. Okay. So, these are the few terminology sometime asked in the viva. Okay. So, let us see that the line passing through the nodal point and center of pupil is called optical axis. The line passing through nodal point and fovea centralis is called visual axis. Okay. And the two axes subtend the small angle between them, which is called angle gamma. Now, the depth of focus. Okay. This pupillary diameter, it not only determine the amount of light which is enter into our eye, but it also determine the depth of focus. Now, see how the depth of focus will change when there will be a change in the pupillary diameter. So, we have a two figure, this one upper figure and lower figure. Both the eyeball which is shown in this figure are almost of same size. Okay. The only difference is difference in the aperture or pupil, the diameter of pupillary aperture. In actually this black line is suggesting the iris, okay, placement of iris. So, in upper figure the pupillary diameter is minimum, it means the iris is almost close the aperture. Okay. So, only the smallest pupillary size is here, and here you can see the aperture is big. Okay. Now, in both the figure we have a two light source, 2-point source of light, this one and this one. Okay. So, when the light rays they are coming from this 2-point source, they are focused on a retina. Okay. You can see in both the figure, even though here the pupillary size is big, but they are still able to focus on retina. Okay. So, in both this figure normally the clear image will be formed on retina, but now observe these dotted lines, two dotted line. It suggests that in this experiment we have tried to move the retina out of focus. It means we have moving the retina from its normal position. Okay. As far as in this figure, when the retina is at its usual position, the focal point is on retina and image is clear to this eye, to this both eye, because normally the image point is on retina. Even in this two figure the image point or focal point is on retina, and that is why the image is clear. But when we move the retina from out of focus, it means from its normal position, then the here, because the focal point is large, okay, you can see the length of focal point is large. So, even if when we are moving the retina out of focus, still the focal point is on retina. Okay. And so, the image remain clear, and as in this second figure, when we move the retina out of focus, the focal point is not on retina. Okay. Here you can see that the point become two line. Okay. The same thing here, the point is not remain as such a focal point, but it become a line. Okay. So, we can say the in second figure, when the pupillary aperture is large or dilated, at that time if the retina become out of focus, there will be a blurring of image. Okay. So, in this second figure the image become blurred, while in first figure even though we are moving the retina out of focus, the image remain clear. So, in from this we can conclude that this first figure having a more depth of focus compared to the second figure, because in first figure we can move the retina to and fro from its normal position, but here we cannot move. If we move the retina from its usual position, then it cause the blurring of vision. Okay. So, here the depth of focus is less. Okay. And instead of moving the retina, the another thing which can move the focal point, that is the changing the curvature of the lens. Okay. By changing the curvature of the lens, we can make a same type of changes, or in that also when the pupillary size is small, even if we change the curvature of the lens, the depth of focus is more in first figure when the pupillary diameter is less, and the depth of focus is less in second figure when pupillary diameter is more. Okay. So, ultimately less pupillary diameter having a more depth of focus, and the large pupillary diameter having a less depth of focus. Now, the reason is that when the pupil is very small, so almost all the light they pass through the center of the lens, and when the line or light rays which pass through the center of the lens, it cause a minimum deviation and directly go straight and focus on a retina. Okay. So, that is why it form a though the brightness is less, but the image is sharp. The image which is formed by the small pupillary diameter, it may having a less brightness because less amount of light is enter into our eye, but the sharpness is more. Okay. So, this is about depth of focus. More the it means the less the diameter of the pupil, more is the depth of focus, and more the diameter of the pupil, less is the depth of focus. So, this is about the depth of focus. Now, the errors of refraction. So, first figure is emmetropia. Emmetropia means normal eye. When the parallel light rays, they focus on the retina with the ciliary muscle at relaxed position. In the emmetropia, it means the normal eye, the parallel light rays focus on a retina with a relaxed ciliary muscle. It means without accommodation. Okay. Relaxed ciliary muscle means without accommodation. So, in the relaxed state of ciliary muscle, when the parallel light rays which are able to focus on a retina, that condition is known as emmetropia. Now, the one type of error of refraction is hyperopia, which is also known as hypermetropia, in which the parallel light rays, they are focusing behind the retina, because here we can see the focal point is behind the retina, that is known as hyperopia or hypermetropia. This type of abnormality occur when either the eyeball is of small size. Okay. So, eyeball is if small size, or the accommodating power or the power of lens is less. Okay. Because if the power of lens is less, they are not able to cause the proper conversion, and that is why the image is formed or focal point is formed behind the retina. Normally, it should be formed on the retina, but here in hyperopia or hypermetropia, it is formed behind the retina. Now, in this case, the person is because the parallel rays are forming behind the retina. So, the person even use the accommodation for a distant vision. The parallel rays we are considered they are coming for far object. So, they are mainly for distant vision. Okay. But in hypermetropia or hyperopia, the person using the accommodation power to focus the object which are situated at the far distance. Okay. Normally, the accommodation is only to see the near object, but in hyperopia, the person is also using accommodation to see the far object, and as the object comes nearer, this accommodating power is gradually become fatigue, and the person is not able to see the near object clearly. Okay, they can see the far object clearly with use of accommodation, but because of the excessive use of accommodation even for the distance vision, that leads to the fatigue of ciliary muscles, and that may leads to the headache. Okay, and sometimes in the children, if the hyperopia is there and it is remain undetected, then in that case the because of the accommodation, the images may form clearly, but it leads to the double vision, because accommodation is also leads to convergence of the eyeball. Okay, not only the contraction of the ciliary muscles, but it also leads to the whole movement of the eyeball. The both the eyeball, they converge medially. Okay, and because of this conversion, when the one eye having a hypermetropia and another eye is normal, so at that time the vision become double vision. Okay, so in that case, in the one eye the double vision is formed, and that the brain is not able to register that double vision. So the transmission through the optic nerve through this affected eye is gradually stopped, and that's why the visual cortex which receives the impulse from the affected eye, they are gradually stopped, and that leads to the blindness in the affected eye. Okay, if it is remain undetected, the clear image is formed in normal eye and double vision is in the affected eye. So that type of abnormality ultimately leads to blindness in the affected eye, and that is known as amblyopia x anopia. Okay, that blindness in the affected eye due to uncorrected hyperopia or hypermetropia, that condition is known as amblyopia x anopsia. Okay, so that's why it is important to detect and correct hyperopia at early age, and this hyperopia is also known as far sightedness, because in this the far object can be seen with the help of accommodation, but as the objects comes nearer, it is difficult to see it clearly. Okay, so that is known as the hyperopia. The myopia, last one, refractory error, myopia, in which the parallel light rays, they are focused in front of retina. Here the focal point is in front of retina, and this is result either because of a large anteroposterior diameter of eyeball, or because of excessive power of lens. Okay, so there is no any other way, normally physiologically no any mean to decrease either the diameter of the anteroposterior diameter of the eyeball, or to decrease the power of the lens. Okay, if normally it is high at the relaxed ciliary muscle state, if the power is already high, then we have no any mean to decrease the power. So only mean is to we have to use the glasses or lenses, or correct this with the help of concave lens. Okay, so but in myopia, because the parallel light rays which are coming from far object, it is difficult to focus on the retina. It is, they are not focusing on the retina, rather they are focusing in front of the retina. So image of far object is blur. Okay, so person having the myopia having difficulty to see the far object. Here the far point is not infinite. Okay, normally in previous lecture we had discussed that normally the far point is at infinity, but in myopia the far point is not at infinity. There is a limitation beyond which the person cannot see the far object. Okay, so but in myopia the person may see the near object, and that's why it is known as near sightedness. Hyperopia is known as far sightedness, myopia is known as near sightedness. Now the correction of myopia and hyperopia. So this one upper figure is actually correction of myopia. Okay, to correct the myopia, this solid line, it is showing the actual defect in myopia. The focal point is in front of retina. This dotted line is after correction. So when we use the concave lens, okay, in myopia we have to use the concave lens, so it causes some amount of diversion of the parallel light rays, and after passing through the normal refractory medium of the eye, they are focused on the retina. Okay, so that is about the correction of myopia. And correction of hyperopia is by a biconvex lens. Okay, here this solid line is what occurs in hyperopia. Without correction, it is formed behind the retina, but after correction, after increasing the convergence with the help of biconvex lens, it may focus on retina. And this type of correction is done by trial and error. First we use a one strength of either of the lens, convex or concave, and then we gradually increase and decreasing the power of the lens and see at which particular power the person is able to see. So this correction is determined by the trial and error method. Now another type of error of refraction is astigmatism. Now astigmatism is the condition when the light rays which pass from the one plane of refractory medium is focused at one point, and the plane which is right angle to that plane, that light rays, they are focused on another point. So here rather than a single focal point, we have a more than one focal point. Okay, and this you can compare the astigmatism with a cylindrical lens. If you remember, in our previous lecture we had discussed that the cylindrical lens, they having a different plane, and the light rays, they are refracted and focus at a different points, okay, in cylindrical lens. The another example of astigmatism is when the light rays they are passing from a lens which having a shape that of egg. Okay, so egg having a two axis, long axis and short axis. So the short axis having a more curvature than the long axis. So the light rays which passing from a long axis, they converge less compared to the light rays which passes from the short axis. Okay, so these two different line are formed, and because the two different focal lines are formed or focal points are formed, the image become blur. Okay, and this type of condition occur mostly because of the uh, ununiform curvature of cornea. Normally the curvature of the cornea is uniform. Okay, but in some condition, at some place the curvature is more, at some place the curvature is less. Okay, or at some point some the corneal surface is bulging, and at some point it is depressed or less curve. Okay, so that's why the light rays which are passing through the cornea, they act as a different plane. The different surface of the cornea, they act as a different plane, and they focus at two different focal points, or they form a two different focal line. For example, here in this figure we have a one lens which have a two different type of curvature in BD plane and in AC plane. Here it shows that the plane BD having a more refractory power. Okay, so the light rays which are passing from this plane BD, they are focused on a focal line for plane BD because they are having a more refractory power than plane AC. So they are focused nearer than the light rays which are passing from plane AC, which having a less refractory power. So you can see they are going to focus behind the plane BD. So here we have a two focal line. So naturally, if you imagine one retina, and either any one plane is focused on the retina or neither of the plane will focus on the retina, so the image naturally become blur, and you cannot correct this with the normal power of accommodation, because even if the power of accommodation they uh, correct the image in only one plane, then another plane remain uncorrected. The image which is formed by another plane remain uncorrected. Okay, so that's why the two type of lenses are used, cylindrical as well as spherical. That in one place the defect is corrected by spherical lens and another plane is corrected by cylindrical lens. But before that we have to determine the particular axis in which the abnormality is there. So we have to determine this plane of or axis of the plane. Okay. So for that this type of image is used which having a parallel bars. Okay. In this image you can see that the different parallel bar they are arranged at different axes. Okay. Some are horizontal, some are vertical, and some are at different angle between the horizontal and vertical. Okay. So person we are asked the person to see this image, and in this the person first given the different spherical lenses. Okay, the person has to view through different spherical lenses. So during that person may see through a some bars is very clear for this person. From this image only few bars are able to see clearly by a person with the spherical lens, and the bar which are at the right angle to this spherical lens through this clear bar which are blurred. Okay. So this blur bars which are right angle to the clear bars, that blurred bar they are considered as having the same axis as that of the defective axis. Okay, and accordingly the cylindrical lens is then placed on this right angle plane. Okay, or at this axis. For example, suppose this horizontal line is seen clearly by a spherical lens, and this vertical line which is right angle to the horizontal line is blurred. In that case we can say that this axis is defective, and we have to put a cylindrical lens which can able to clear this axis. Okay. So accordingly by determining the axis, the clinician then order the optician to form a combination of spherical and cylindrical lens to correct the astigmatism. And the astigmatism is more corrected by a contact lens rather than the normal spectacles which are formed by the glass, because the normal spectacles they remain somewhat in front of the actual eye, while the contact lens they are remain in contact with the actual corneal surface. Okay. So astigmatism is better corrected by a contact lens than by a spectacles. The advantage of contact lens apart from this correction of astigmatism is that the lens turn with the eye and gives a broader field of clear vision than the glasses do. Okay. Because the lens they are also turned with the eyeball, so it gives a better field of vision compared to the glasses. And the contact lens has little effect on size of the object the person see through the lens, whereas the lens placed 1 centimeter or so in front of the eye do affect the size of the image in addition to correcting the focus. So these are the two advantages of contact lenses. Okay. One is better field of vision, and another is the person is able to see the actual size of the object. Okay, while that object is look somewhat different with the spectacles. Okay, so these are about the advantage of contact lens. Now the visual acuity. So visual acuity is the same as that of the somatic sensation of tactile discrimination. Okay, you have learned the tactile discrimination in somatic sensation. Okay, so in which the ability of person to differentiate or to perceive two separate points on a skin, that is known as the tactile discrimination. So here, rather than the 2 point on the skin, the 2 points on the retina, the ability of the eye to differentiate the 2 point source of the image, that ability is known as the visual acuity, but that ability depends on the formation of visual angle. Okay, so what is visual angle? First we see that the distance between the two retinal images depends not on the absolute distance between the two objects, but on visual angle subtended at the nodal point of the eye. Now here we have a 2 point source, you can see in this figure. So it is not actually depends on the distance between the 2 point source, but it depends on this angle which is formed at the nodal point. This one is the nodal point. Okay, now when the uh, point source of the image, it form the image on the retina, this one is the retina. Okay, so it is not a very small, rather than it occupy a diameter of around 11 micrometer. Okay, in which the center is bright and the peripheral is gradually become less bright. Okay, but these two images which is formed by a 2 point source of light, uh, they the one image is of 11 micrometer diameter and their centers, they are approximately 2 micrometer distance. Okay, and the diameter of the cone, actually this visual acuity we are here discussing on fovea centralis. Okay, the whole fovea having a diameter of 5 millimeter. Okay, or you can say around 500 micrometer. Out of this, the one cone, the fovea centralis, they are only having a cones, no rods. Okay, and fovea centralis having a maximal visual acuity out of all the retina, all the area of the retina. The fovea centralis having a maximum visual acuity. It means the fovea centralis can identify two near objects, okay, at the minimum distance, while the other retinal area, they having a less visual acuity. It means the distance between the 2 point source, they should be more than the fovea centralis. So you can compare this with the, as I told you, with somatic sense, that the maximum tactile discrimination is the is where the number of receptors are more. For example, on the fingertips and lips, they are more sensitive area compared to the back area. Okay, so same way the fovea centralis having a maximum visual acuity and they having a very nearer cones. The cones are situated very nearer to each other at fovea centralis, and the diameter of the cone is 1.5 micrometer. So when the two different individual cone is stimulated, when this central point, they are 2 micrometer at distance, and the visual angle which is formed here is around 1 minute of visual angle is formed. Okay, so the distance between the two retinal image depend not on absolute distance between the two object, but on a visual angle subtended at the nodal point of eye. The minimum visual angle uh, required for clear vision is called visual acuity. Okay, so minimal the visual angle, higher is the visual acuity. Now clinically, to determine the visual acuity, we use this chart. The person who has ever gone for their number checking for spectacle use, they are familiar with this chart. This chart is known as Snellen's chart. Okay, Snellen chart, and you will also see this in your clinical practical also. Okay, so this Snellen chart is used to clinically determine the visual acuity. and this chart is made up of different size of letter. Actually, the size of letter is made such a way that at each size of letter it form the visual angle of 5 minutes. The whole letter they form the visual angle of 5 minutes, but their stroke, each stroke of the letter, they form the visual angle of only 1 minute at, at the nodal point. Okay, so this type of chart is used. Now you can see that the each line they given one number, that number showing the d is equal to 5, d equal to 6, d is equal to 9. So the each number, d means distance, this distance suggesting the normal person should read this line through this much amount of distance in meter. Okay, the normal person should read this line at 5 meter, this second line at 6 meter, the third line at 9 meter, the fourth line at 24 meter distance, okay, and so on. Okay, so normally our vision should be 6 by 6. What we use the normal clinical reading by Snellen's chart for emetropic eye or for normal person is 6 by 6, in which the numerator is the distance at which the patient is reading and the denominator is the this line, that which line they are able to read. Okay, if the person is reading the second line, then the person's vision is 6 by 6. Normally we ask the subject, when we are performing this clinical test on Snell's chart, we ask the person to stand at the distance of 6 meter. So that that distance from the numerator, and the denominator is at which line it is able to read. Suppose he is able to read only this line, okay, then his or her vision is 6 by 36. Okay, it means the normal person is able to read this line at 36 meter distance, and this subject has to come at the distance of 6 meter. Okay, the numerator is 6 and denominator is 36. So this is the method which is used to measure the visual acuity clinically. Okay. The visual acuity is highest at the fovea centralis. For clear foveal vision, 2-point object must sustain the visual angle of at least 1 minute to be seen as separate. So this is the visual angle at fovea centralis, and there is a minimum requirement to see the two separate points. If the angle is less than this, then it may suggest that instead of 2 we see only 1 point. Even though the actual point source are 2 point, we are able to see only 1 point. Okay. So this is about the visual acuity and Snellen's chart. Now the determination of distance of an object from the eye, that is the depth perception, that which object are situated at the far from the subject or which object is near to the subject, how the our eye that determine that. Okay, actually it is not only the functions of the eye, but it also includes the function of brain. Okay, and our brain is trained to determine that which object is near and which object is far. So it is a combined function of both the retina or the structure of the eye as well as the brain. Okay, both they are act combinedly to determine that which object is near and which object is far. Okay, so person normally perceive distance by 3 major mean. Okay, actually you all are doing this in your day to day life, but today we just understand the physiology behind this mechanism. Okay, the size of image of known object on the retina. Okay. We can determine the distance of the object by its size. For example, you know a one person whose actual height is 6 feet. Okay, so you can judge that whether that person is standing near to you or it is standing at far distance, because you already know his or her height. Okay, that his or her height is 6 feet, then you can determine whether that person is near to you or that person is standing far. And this calculation is done subconsciously by our brain. We are not actually thinking about his or her height when we are seeing or determining that that person is near or far. But as I told you that our brain is already trained or it is already used to calculate that subconsciously. But that is the one means by which we are determining or we are perceiving the distance by knowing the size of the image, that how big or small is image going to form on retina, that determine whether the image is near or far. Okay, if the image is near, then the size of image is more, if it is far, the size of image is less. Okay, so that is the one means by which we are causing the or we are perceiving the depth perception. Okay, the second is phenomenon of moving parallax. Now when we are uh, focusing on our visual field, suppose we are focusing on any distance object, okay, we fix our gaze on any distance object, then we move our head. When we move our head, the object which are nearer, for example some object is just at 1 inch, suppose you put your finger at 1 inch distance from your eye and then move your head. So the eye, it is moving from your field of vision completely, while the object as distance they are moving very less. Okay, or even you can able to see the far object with your head moves, but you are not able to see the finger which is situated at 1 inch distance from your eye. Okay, so accordingly you can determine that the finger is near and the object which are still kept on a retina or still kept on your field of vision, it is near. Okay, so that is known as the phenomenon of moving parallax. The third is phenomenon of stereopsis. The stereopsis or binocular vision. Now our two eye, they are approximately two each separated from each other, or their location is at the distance of 2 inches to each other. Okay, so that's why they are showing some the world somewhat differently. Okay, that the object which is at 1 inch distance from the eyeball, their image is formed on the somewhat left side on the left eyeball and somewhat right side on the right eyeball, but the image which is at 20 feet distance, they are focusing on the central corresponding point of retina. Okay, so that is the difference between the near and far object with the binocular vision. Okay, so that phenomenon is known as stereopsis, and this ability to determine distance is called the depth perception. Whatever we had discussed, you can see here in this figure, that one is the size of the image that we had discussed, that the image which is nearer, it perceived as a large, the image which are far, it image form a small image. Okay, the another is moving parallax which we had discussed, and third is the stereopsis. So here this is the near object, red one, you can see it is formed somewhat left on the this retina and focus somewhat right on this retina, but the object which is far, they focus on the corresponding point on the central part of the retina. Okay, so they both they are focused on a central point. So far object they focus on the central point, the near object they are focus somewhat left on the left retina and somewhat right on the right retina. So this is about known as the stereopsis or binocular vision, and all these three mechanisms they are used for depth perception. And finally the ophthalmoscope. Now ophthalmoscope is an instrument which is used to see the retina. The visualization of the retina with the ophthalmoscope is known as fundus examination, and this fundus examination is helps to directly see the retina, okay, in which the observer or the ophthalmologist can see the optic disc, that is the origin of the optic nerve from the eyeball. It also can visualize the whole retina or whole fundus. Okay, examination of the retina with the ophthalmoscope is known as the fundus. So the retina is also known as the fundus. Okay, so that fundus contain the blood vessels, and the blood vessels they uh, particularly showing the arterioles. Okay, so this is the one place where we can see the arterioles directly. Okay, retina is the only place where we can see the arterioles with our eye. Okay, of course with the help of ophthalmoscope, but even with this instrument we can directly see the arterioles. And in certain disease like hypertension, diabetes, the arterioles they are so changes. Okay, so arterial changes in this type of chronic diseases can be seen with the help of ophthalmoscope. Apart from this, the several eye diseases, or we can say there are multiple eye diseases of retina, can be diagnosed by directly seeing with the help of ophthalmoscope. Now the principle of ophthalmoscope says that when the image is formed with any light source on the retina, this images they emit the diverging rays. Okay, because it is act as a point source of the light, it images the diverging rays when it pass through the lens which is situated at the focal length of observed eye or of patient eye. It become parallel, and then it pass through the observer's eye, it means of clinician's eye or ophthalmologist eye, is once again converge and form on the retina which is situated once again at the focal length. Okay, so in this is a simple principle that for which we required a one light source. This one is the light source. We required one mirror which deviate this light source and focus on a patient's retina or observed eyes retina. Observed eyes retina means subject's retina or patient retina. So his or her retina become illuminated, and this illuminated they once again emits the light rays which pass through his or her lens, then become parallel light rays, and it pass through the clinician's eye and focus on clinician's retina. So the clinician's retina or observer's eye, they are able to see the image which is formed on patient's eye. So in short, the clinician can observe the retina of a patient. Okay, and that instrument is known as ophthalmoscope. Okay, and in this, because the both the clinician and observer they are very nearer to each other, so both of their eye they go through the accommodation. So accommodating power of observer and observed eye both increase because of the accommodation, and that accommodation they are considered that both the power increase up to 2 diopters. Okay, 2 diopter of each eye, of observer's eye and of observed eye. So to correct that we have to use a minimum correction of -4 diopter for both the normal eye. Suppose observer's eyes are normal and observed eye is also normal, in that case we have to use a -4 diopter. And in the nowadays ophthalmoscope there is a inbuilt turret on which several lenses are there, and accordingly if any of the observers or observed eye are they are not emmetropic in any case, then the correction is made by that lenses, okay, which are already situated in the turrets of ophthalmoscope. So you have to just move the turret, and they having a different lens, you have to select a lens which gives the clear image. Okay, and in that way this is the principle of ophthalmoscope. And lastly, the cataract. Okay, so cataract is the disease of the eye, which is mainly occur at the old age. The result is, in this disease, the normal transparency of the lens is lost and the lens become opaque. Okay, the reason is that the normally the protein fiber which is form the lens, they are transparent, but as the age increases this protein become denatured and it is then become opaque gradually. And when this opacity is increased uh, more than the certain amount, it affect the transmission of light rays through the lens. So for the correction we have to remove that opacity, and nowadays the implanted lenses are available which are placed instead of this opaque lens. Okay, so this is about the cataract. So with this we have completed this lecture. Thank you.